About 5 years ago, I wandered into a small mom-and-pop game shop with a few friends. I had some money to spare at the time, but I wasn't really planning on buying anything. My friends and I were just looking to kill some time before our movie. As I browsed the ancient games, I came across the usual suspects. An N64, a Sega Genesis, hell, they even had a Virtual Boy on display, and that marked the first and last occasion I've ever gotten a chance to play one. However, it wasn't until I reached their Atari 2600 section that something jumped out at me. My eyes completely glazed over the copies of Pitfall and Adventure, and instead fell on the one thing on the shelf that could be considered actively toxic. A copy of E.T. the Extraterrestrial for the low price of $5. I immediately had to have it. I called over the store clerk and asked him to ring it up for me. Even now, I remember him looking at me, pensive and uncertain. "You know what this is, right?" he said to me, to which I replied, "Oh yeah, I definitely know what this is." He shrugged his shoulders and took my money before I walked out of the store, the proud owner of a copy of the worst game ever made. Now, I realize all of this begs the question of, why? Why would I buy a game like this? Why would I waste my hard-earned money, even if it was only $5 of it, on something that I knew was awful? Just why? That sure as hell is what all of my friends asked me at the time of purchase, as well as everyone who's ever noticed it atop my game shelf. The answer is twofold. One, I think owning it is funny. Because, it is. It's a funny thing to buy. But more importantly, two, E.T. for the Atari 2600 is a priceless piece of history. It is debatably the most important game ever made. There's a fair amount of debate as to whether E.T. caused the video game crash of '83 that caused the death of an untold number of video game companies, brought the monstrously huge Atari to its knees, and effectively erased the home console market in America. Personally, everything I've read about what caused the crash, the death of quality control, the rise of PC gaming, bad business decisions on Atari's part, and so on, lead me to believe that the crash was coming, one way or another. However, it is without a doubt undeniable that, regardless of whether it was the cause or not, E.T. on a cultural level has taken on this symbolic status of the crash itself, and that symbolism makes it important and worth remembering. Without the video game crash, there wouldn't have been an opening in the market for Nintendo to break into. And without Nintendo, we don't get Sega and Sony. And without Sony, we don't get Microsoft. And without all of those companies, we don't get gaming as we know it today. When I look at that cartridge, I don't just see a terrible game for the 2600. I see the point of conception for the art form I love more than any other. I see a game that I can objectively create a line of heritage from it to the original Mario, to Final Fantasy VII, to Dark Souls. Because without this game, the consoles those games were made for wouldn't exist. I see the birth of internet game reviewers like James Rolfe and Spoony that paved the way for more laid-back people like me to do this. I see a cornerstone of gaming culture. I see the game that scorched the earth so that new forests could grow. There are a lot of reasons to buy an artwork beyond it being a quality work or even wanting to experience it. I bought The Puppeteer on release knowing full well I'd probably never play it, but I wanted to support the continued existence of new platforming games, and I wanted it in my collection. Much of Robert Johnson's blues is terribly recorded even by the standards of the era, and has been outclassed and built on in nearly every way by the people who came after him. But every music critic will say he's essential listening because he essentially invented blues, and by proxy, all of the genres that came after. And The Room is a famously massive train wreck of a film, but a great deal of film critics will recommend it as a hilarious failure, and even those who frequently don't recommend it as such will do so to people who want to learn more about film as an art form because it's an amazing tool for learning what not to do. And all of this stands true for E.T. In the 5 years I've owned the physical copy of E.T., I've never played it. In fact, I don't even own a 2600. Never have, in fact. I've played the game before, but I don't know if I'll ever play the cartridge of it that I own. Even if I do, I know I'd hate every second I spent doing so. Like I said, I've played this before. But in spite of that, I've never once regretted my purchase even a little. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it's one of my favorite games in my collection. It is a truly awful piece of work, but it's a truly awful piece of work that represents the fall of empires and a changing course in history. And it's not very often you get to hold something that powerful in your hands and call it yours. There isn't much I wouldn't trade for the opportunity to experience something like that. So when I was offered that kind privilege for $5, you're damn right I went for it. I'd say it's a steal.